9:36, and I'll call the meeting to order. For anybody who's paying attention, we are starting a few minutes late because of some technical issues that have now been resolved. And the first item of business is adoption of the agenda. Do I have a mover? Councillor Finch.
Moved by Finch, seconded by Mitchell, that the agenda be adopted as amended to include item 10A.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Having adopted the agenda, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof? Not seeing any. Minutes of the minutes and business arising out of the minutes. Any mover? Councillor Finch.
Moved by Finch, seconded by Mitchell, that the minutes from the January 15th, 2024 council meeting be adopted as printed and circulated.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Public comment period, nobody submitted. So on to public meetings and drainage meetings. Do we have a resolution to go into a public meeting? Councillor Finch.
Moved by Finch, seconded by Mitchell, that the council meeting be adjourned at 9:37 a.m. for the purpose of holding a public meeting pursuant to the provisions of the Planning Act.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And Planner McDonald, zone change application ZN5-24-13. I will turn it over to you for your presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Ryan. Good morning to council, staff, members of the public joining us here this morning. The application for zone change before council affects lands locally known as the Happy Hills Resort in the north end of the township. And specifically, it pertains to a portion of that subject property. So the property as a whole comprises well over 100 acres, whereas the application today seeks to add a permission to the site-specific Rec 7 zone. That specific area is highlighted on the plate for council, and it comprises approximately 20 acres of their property. In this instance, the permitted uses within the Rec 7 zone are the existing use of the year-round living, the trailers and the modular homes that are made up of what they refer to as the retirement section of the park, as well as a recreational hall/facility. There are no other permitted uses within the Rec 7 zone, and the applicants are seeking today to add a specific permitted use as a mini storage building. The building that's proposed is approximately 30 feet by 100 feet and would contain 26 individual self-contained units. And the applicants have advised that the anticipation is residents of the park exclusively would be able to rent one of these 26 units for storing their personal belongings. The report itself highlights a number of reasons as far as why we are not supportive of the application today. Primarily, I would just highlight for council the uses that are permitted in prime agricultural areas are quite limited through both the county's official plan, the provincial policy planning statement, and the permitted use in prime agricultural areas document. I would highlight, however, that the existing use, the resort, Happy Hills Resort, has been in place since the 90s. It is recognized in the county's official plan and in the township zoning bylaw as being permitted. This council and previous councils have also seen other applications to modify the existing park, as well as specifically the Rec 7 zone. What we're looking at today, however, is, I would suggest, rather than minor, more of a substantial deviation from recognizing the permitting recreational use, where it's looking to introduce what we would consider a non-compatible and non-agricultural use, that being mini storage. Mini storage itself is not defined in the township zoning bylaw. It is categorized under the definition of warehousing, and warehousing is limited in the township of Zorra to restricted industrial zones. We do also have some properties which may have highway commercial or central commercial zoning on them that do have mini storage facilities on site. However, they tend to go through a site-specific zone change, much like the one before you today, and are subject to site plan approval as well. So there are some that exist, but primarily they are directed to settlement areas and more specifically to restricted industrial zone properties. As a result of circulation, we did not receive any comments from any agencies or residents from the area. We did, however, receive fairly extensive comments from staff. Those are highlighted in the report. A number of items flagged by emergency services, some from the building department, for council's consideration here today. And as I noted, the planning department is not supportive of the application today for the reasons outlined in the report. However, I'm happy to answer any questions council may have. I would also note that Matthew Baker and Elaine Baker, the owners and operators of the resort, are in attendance today and are also happy to speak to their application. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for the planner on the report? Not seeing any. Does the applicant wish to speak to their application? Yes. Come on up. Just hit the button, and when my microphone comes on red, then you're good to go.
Good morning, Council. My name is Matt Baker from Happy Hills. Regarding the application, kind of looks a little bit negatively, I guess, towards approval here, but just wanted to say a few things. I guess fire services had some questions potentially about safety in the area, I guess. It's not really changing like traffic flow or anything through the park or the area. The building will be exclusively for the residents. There will be, a good access to around the building. There'll be a 20-foot laneway minimum around the entire thing, so they will be able to drive trucks around it. And then potentially some fire mitigation issues, which we are more than willing to work with the department if they have any suggestions for that. It was mentioned about the prime agricultural area. Yes, we are surrounded by agricultural area, but we are not specifically ag. We are Rec 7 zoning, and we are the only ones in Zorra Township and potentially Oxford County. So approval for this would not affect any other areas within Zorra Township for sure. And the land has never been ag land. Like, we're not taking away farmers' field or anything. It's just land that we used to plant our own trees and transplant them throughout the park. The residents do have accessory structures on their individual sites in the form of a shed, so that was another option that people were talking about bringing or storing equipment in. They're not large, so by the time, say, you get bicycle, golf clubs, snowblower, some people like to tinker or putter out of these sheds, so they have little workshops in them. So it's not like they're a lot of space. And other than that, basically it would be under their homes that they would store items. And for most people, it's a retirement community, so to crawl into your home to grab something under there is a little bit difficult. So this storage shed would help as well, just kind of clean up people's houses, their yards. And for the larger ones, you could store items like golf carts, which in the wintertime, typically they just wrap them up with tarps on their site, or they're permitted a little storage shelter temporarily to cover them for the winter. I think there's potential for, or there's a question, I guess, regarding the building plan, potentially visual or accessibility, I guess. The building is going to be, it's over 250 meters off the road, so it's not like it's going to be a big building you're going to see and it's going to be visually appalling or anything. It's we're going to make it look nice and represent the community, which also we like to keep neat and tidy. It'll be 40 feet off the property line as well, so it's not going to encroach on any neighboring farmers or fields. Yeah, I think that's kind of all I had to state on that for now. Is there any questions that you guys have for me?
Thank you. Questions from Council for the applicant? Councillor Finch, then Councillor Mitchell.
So you're hoping with this shed to have it for the golf carts for the winter storage, not to have residents working in there, like woodworking and that kind of thing?
No, the idea is it'll be for personal storage. There won't be access to hydro or water in there, so it'll be for personal belongings and storage of, anything like that.
Councillor Mitchell.
So I had three questions. The first one, and I think you confirmed it, that this land where the building would be is not in agriculture production, and no plan to put it in agriculture production?
Nope.
Second one is, on plate number 2 in the report, it shows a private road that comes off of line 31 that goes past the, some of the housing
Yep.
and would end to where this building's going to be. Is that road wide enough and strong enough that fire trucks could use it?
Yep, it's wide enough and strong enough for fire trucks. So yeah, you'll see two entrances off the 31st line. The one's the main entrance with our gate that the fire trucks usually come in. But in emergency cases, we have that second road, which goes right by the storage shed, which is basically, yeah, for emergency uses, we open up the gates and they can come in and out. Basically, yeah, we've had homes come through there, so it's wide enough to fit in like a 14-foot wide park model modular home.
And my last question is, the size of these homes and these sheds, what typically, like on a square footage, are the homes and the sheds? And I think you referenced that storage under, but so does that mean there's no basements in these buildings, so there's no storage?
Yeah, so there's no basements in the buildings. They're built on piers. The older ones are actually just on gravel pads. So you basically have like probably 2, maybe 3 foot clearance underneath the homes. And the newer ones are on concrete now. Rough square footage, the sheds themselves, they kind of vary in size. We changed the rules a little bit. Initially they were 7 by 7. Now they're 8 by 10.
Okay, so limited indoor storage available. Like if you put it underneath,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
still exposed to
It's
to
still
the
exposed.
environment and animals and whatnot. So,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, it's still exposed to the environment, and yeah, not the easiest way for people to get their things.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Deputy Mayor Grigg.
So I have a question of clarification from the applicant, but then I think the actual question will be for staff. So you had mentioned that on site there's the ability for people to have accessory structures with their modular home, like a shed that they can store some things in. And the intention with this structure is that it should be for the exclusive usage of the residents of the park for additional storage space. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah.
So my question is actually for staff. Are there any, and I'm going to direct to Spencer, but if it's someone else, is there anything tools that we have to ensure that the usage is exclusive to the residents of the park? Or if the structure for self-contained mini storage were permitted through this application, well, the intention is for it to be exclusive use, could it in theory operate that the units could be provided to anybody?
Through the mayor to the question, it's a good question, and I think, strictly speaking, the best way to ensure that we don't have to police something like this and enforce it from a zoning bylaw standpoint is by not permitting the use. That said, the applicant, if they were permitted to have this structure, could provide the township with these agreements that specify that you have to be a resident of the park. However, ultimately, that's something where we would rely on our enforcement staff to follow up with and be conducting inspections to see, is this unit rented to a resident of the park? And I don't think that township would want to explore that option. But if there are comments from other township staff on the enforcement piece, I'd be happy to let them speak to it.
Any other questions for the applicant? Councillor Stewart.
And sorry, I think it is for the planner, actually. I wonder just if I could get a little bit more background on the Rec 7. I assume that zoning is just specific to this site zoning, and there's no other Rec 7 in the township.
Through the mayor, that's correct.
So what were, and I know this is not part of this application, but it's context to consider this application. So there's a rec center with an indoor pool and, you know, recreational space. Was that all part of the original Rec 7 zoning when it was granted? And the justification was that these individual lots or locations for homes as well as the rec center, was that all part of the original Rec 7?
Through the mayor, I can't speak to whether or not everything was encompassed as part of the original Rec 7. However, the use itself, the park, does predate the township zoning bylaw. So at some point in time, they broke out the Rec 7 from the rest of the park to specifically note that it is for their recreation facility that they have there. and it specifically caps the number of units that are within that Rec 7 area. They're permitted up to 96 units. The report refers to 75, or the building department has told me they are over 80. They're closer to 85 units there currently. So they are almost maxed out on the number of units, but it does not expressly permit anything beyond the rec facility that's there and the units that are there. So I do believe that when county staff through planning department brought forward applications to recognize this Rec 7, they specifically excluded additional uses, including accessory structures, for the reason that they didn't want to allow this type of development.
Anything else for the applicant?
Yeah, actually, I'd like to comment on, you talked about the contract, I guess, whether or not we'd be having other people from outside the park want to use that. And that's something we really don't want, is to have extra traffic coming into our gated community. People kind of like having the privacy and not having to worry about random people coming in and out. We only have 26 units for our, basically we've got 84 residents right now. We're actually zoned for 96. So it's not like, it's like 1/3 of the group there. So we'll easily fill them with the current residents we do have.
Anything else for that, Councillor Finch?
So will you be making up contracts of some form for this? And maybe we can add those stipulations in there is that an option?
Yep, we will be making contracts because we'll have to do rental agreements with the clients, and basically it'll include basically renting only 2 people in the retirement section there, as well as say if they happen to sell their home and move somewhere else, that at that time they will have to give up the storage unit that they will be renting.
Anything else for the applicant? Thank you. Are there any members of the public here or virtually who wish to speak to the application? Not seeing any. Does somebody have a motion to come out of the public meeting? Councillor Mitchell.
Moved by Councillor Mitchell, seconded by Councillor Finch, that the Council of the Township of Zorra approve in principle the zone change application submitted by 409315 Ontario Limited, whereby the lands described as Lot 20...
Sorry, Councillor Mitchell, we need the motion to come out of public meeting.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I apologize. I was keen to get at this.
Moved by Councillor Finch, seconded by Councillor Mitchell, that the purpose of the Planning Act, the public meeting be adjourned at 9:53 and the regular meeting of council be called back to order.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Councillor Mitchell.
I apologize. You'd think by now I'd know the procedure on what we do in and out, but anyway, I think obviously I'm a little bit passionate about this one, but anyway, I'll start over. Moved by Councillor Mitchell, seconded by Councillor Finch, that the Council of the Township of Zorra approve in principle the zone change application submitted by 409315 Ontario Limited, whereby the lands described as Lot 25, Concession 1, West Zorra, Township of Zorra, to amend the existing Rec 7 zone to establish a new site-specific provisions for the existing use on the subject property.
Councillor Mitchell, as the mover, do you wish to speak to that?
Yes, I'm obviously in favor of the application. I understand that it doesn't quite fit the regulations as they're laid out in our zoning bylaws, but the applicant has confirmed that the land where this building would be is not under agriculture production, and although it is zoned in that way, he's also confirmed that it's accessible for emergency response, and I have fought at least one fire in the Happy Hills community, not in that part of the park, but another, and there was no issues with getting equipment and people in to handle the situation. I think it enhances the Happy Hills community, and given that there's only 26 units for, I think, 75 homeowners, I don't have any concerns about this becoming a commercial operation available to the general public. It is a restricted access community, so I don't see that that's going to change. There's been no complaints from area residents, and I always take that into account. And I think the concerns that are expressed by the chief building official and the fire chief in the report can be addressed in the planning and the permit application. So I think that we should approve this application.
Councillor Finch is the seconder. Anyone else? Deputy Mayor Grigg.
So I won't be in support of this motion. As it was mentioned in the planning report, we've had other planning matters come before us in relation to this property. And I do have an understanding that the current usage of this property predates our zoning bylaw. And I think it is our role to support that approved, recognized usage in relation to into how it is set to operate. My challenge with this one is that while it is intended to be that supportive use to the existing approved operation, it does have the potential to become a bit of a different usage. I appreciate and believe that the owners are genuine in their intention of how they want this to be used and for it to be only used by the owners of the park. But as soon as we've permitted this structure to go up, we really don't have the policing tools to manage this in an ongoing basis. And I think that's in a really important piece for me in terms of what is sticking as not functional in this application. As we've seen over years, you know, land owners can change hands, business operators can change hands, but it's the zoning and the permitted uses of the property that carries forward. So while I appreciate the intention of this to support the those who are living at Happy Hills through the owner of the property, there's not enough to it that allows for it to be a supportive secondary structure to the operation of the park. It deviates to me to a place where it almost becomes a separate business that does not fit in the ag reserve as per our existing policies. So while the Rec 7 zoning is specific to this property, and this is a very unique property, I have been supportive in the past from deviating to support that ongoing usage, but for me this is too far of a departure. I appreciate the comments from Councillor Mitchell and the applicant in relation to the fire service concerns. But when I refer back to this report, there is comment from our fire chief, and I don't believe that those that the concerns raised in the report, that we've gotten to a place that they're fully addressed. If there was an opportunity to maybe revisit what this application is looking like, I could have some appetite for that, but as proposed today, I will not be in support of this application.
Anyone else? Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, this is a tough one because it is a unique situation, so I think you have to look at it as a one-off. I don't think I can support this, and the main reason is not that I'm sure there could be a workaround for emergency services or any building-related concerns that could be resolved. To me, it's the departure from the zoning, and if we're looking at, and this is the reason I was asking for a little bit of context on the Rec 7 zoning. Obviously, people moving in here are choosing a certain lifestyle change, whether it's downsizing, moving into this community, and I don't pretend to know anything about what that's like, but they know what they're getting into, and they're moving into that place. It's downsizing, it's maybe sacrificing on some conveniences that you might have in other communities, in other villages that have access to commercial. One of the questions I wrote down for myself when I'm thinking about this was, you know, what other justified uses could be brought forward next? And I think that's the problem, and I know every application would be viewed independently, but it would be great to have a mini mart there, I'm sure, for conveniences of groceries and that kind of thing. So it could extend beyond, and of course, you know, one application doesn't set a precedent for the next, but I think that's the purpose of having the zoning restrictions, is to stay within them and only approve ones that are minor deviations from that.
Anyone else? I have a question of clarification for the planner. My understanding is then that this property is not existing non-conforming, but it was actually, its use was actually explicitly permitted by OP change in zoning bylaw that provided for the Rec 7 zoning, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then follow up to that, that OP change and Rec 7 zoning specifically then, when it was created, prohibited the storage use, or did not permit, sorry, the storage use.
That's correct. The Rec 7 zone most specifically only identified the existing rec hall that they have and the units and capped the number of units at 96.
Thank you. Yeah, I won't be supporting the motion to approve this. I completely understand, you know, the desire of the residents to have their storage and everything, and I applaud the property owners for wanting to provide what services their residents want to have. But similar to Councillor Stewart, you know, and all 5 of us, and if there was 10 of us would, you know, 20 of us would draw the line at a different spot as to how much more varied permitted uses do you put on a property like this. And for me, you know, when individual residents have individual storage beside their residence, I think, as Councillor Stewart said, you know, for a property like this, a settlement like this, to me, that's sufficient. That is, you know, if you want to have a large storage facility, that's, in my opinion, not efficient land use in the agricultural reserve. Notwithstanding that this land is not in production and has no plans to be in production, there's still a question of efficient land use, right? And that when we densify over here, we put off sprawl over here, even by not building there. And I think there's always got to be, for me, there's always got to be consideration of the overall efficient land use in the entire map of the Township of Zorra. And I think this is, the report makes it clear that this is not efficient land use for the reasons explicitly set out in our zoning bylaw and the OP that made it not only permitted, but not existing non-conforming, but explicitly permitted in the OP and the zoning bylaw, with the exclusion of the storage, or without permission to do the storage. So for me, I think in this case, the existing zoning bylaw is appropriate, and for me, I draw the line just this side of saying, yeah, storage for individual use beside your unit, sure. A larger communal sort of storage space, I think, is just that little bit too far. So for that reason, I won't be supporting the motion on the floor. Anybody else before I call the question? Can I have the motion? I don't think I have it. Thank you. So that's up to council right now if they want to, what they want to do with it. Yeah. Anybody else before I call the question? You want me to read it again, or all those in favor? Opposed? That is defeated. So, sorry, Deputy Mayor Green?
So with that motion defeated, I'd like to put a new motion on the floor.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, we still have an application before us that we haven't resolved, so while it hasn't been approved.
Okay, go.
I'm wondering if we could maybe take 5 minutes.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. 10:17, I'll call the meeting back to order. And Deputy Mayor Grigg, I believe you have a motion.
Thank you for that time to get this worked out. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Stewart, that the Council of the Township of Zorra defer the zone change application submitted by 409315 Ontario Limited until such time as the applicant has worked with planning staff to address 1, the self-contained storage nature of the existing application, 2, the potential for reduction in lot coverage for the structure, and 3, the concerns in relation to fire and emergency services comments.
So just first, want to make sure we're all on the same page here. Can we, that's kind of complicated, can we get a version of that on the screen so all of council can see it before we get into debate? I just want to make sure you're all looking at the same thing and debating the same thing before we go too far. And then Deputy Mayor Grigg is the mover. Do you wish to speak to that?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, there was an appetite to work with the applicant to try to support this, but ultimately, with the original request as written, there was enough concerns among council that we were not able to. The applicant indicated that they were interested in continuing to work and modify the application with planning staff to address some of those concerns, and so I'd like to be able to give them that opportunity to do so without defeating this, closing off the process, and having them have to start over. I think in our comments in relation to the previous vote, we've really highlighted what those areas of concern are, and that's what I've tried to capture in this motion, so that we know what it is we're asking for to come back, and what the applicant can work with planning staff to hopefully address. So the first piece is in relation to the self-contained storage units, which is the piece of that structure that I think is what deviates most from that policy framework. The second piece is the potential for reduction in lot coverage for the structure. So when we are deviating from our land use policy framework in consideration of an accessory structure, the size and scope of it, I think, has some relevance too. So if there's potential to reduce the overall size of it, I would like that to be a consideration. And then the concerns in relation to fire and emergency services. Comment from the applicant demonstrated an appetite for addressing those concerns. So I would just like to see that sort of a little bit more work on exactly what that would mean, and having that be part of the revised application if they choose to bring it back.
Councillor Stewart is the seconder.
Yeah, I think of these 3 points, again, any kind of future report will just be, I mean, we may expand on just these 3 points, but I think we're just specifically identifying these. The first one is what stands out for me. If there's a solution that maybe gets the applicant or the residents of this area what they want in terms of additional storage without it being a lot like a commercial application, so it's a communal storage area potentially, or just a large structure where everybody's got a corner of the building or something like that, that's more in line with the current zoning. I can support talking about that, but if it came back that they were, still locked separately and creating the same potential problems, then it's still the same deviation to me, but I'm absolutely willing to see an update to this application.
Anyone else? Yeah, I can support this. I don't want to be misleading. This doesn't dismiss the concerns that I had with the original application, but I think, saying let's give the applicant time to work with staff on something, and maybe something can be come up with. I never want to stand in the way of that, so I can support this. But I think there are real concerns here that would need to be addressed before I would vote in favor of it. But I think this gives the opportunity to have a discussion about what those concerns are, so I can support this for sure. Anyone else before I call the question? Councillor Finch.
I'm happy to support this. I think between the planner and the applicant, they can come to some agreement that works for all of us.
Anyone else? All those in favor? Oh, sorry.
Just through you, Mr. Mayor, just one item to clarify. It's a three-part deferral, essentially, if it's carried. The first part speaks to the mini storage nature of the building. So the way I interpret the proposed direction of council would be that the applicant has afforded additional time to work with staff to come back with a proposal that's more reflective of an accessory structure, smaller in scale, and addresses the concerns raised by emergency services staff.
So I'll first ask the mover if that's their intent.
Thank you.
And seconder?
Yeah, that's how I understand it as well.
And everybody else on council, is that your understanding? Good point, thank you. I usually do ask staff if the motion on the floor is clear enough direction, so apologies. Anybody else then, before I call the question? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So, after much ado, basically what that says is you have more conversations with Spencer, try and address those three areas, and it's up to you, essentially, how and when you want to proceed with another application, or not another application, but follow up on this application with that deferral. Okay? All right. And delegations. 1023. So thanks for waiting. Frank Gross and Sean Van Acker, Oxford County Post Monitoring Speed Review Findings and Recommendations. You guys come on up, and you know how the microphones work, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Ryan and Council, for allowing us to give this presentation. We wanted to follow up with speed management and post-monitoring reviews that we completed at the county for communities of Embro, Kintore, and Uniondale. Can I scroll through the slides here? Yes. Perfect, okay. So we'll start with Embro. Study area from the map there is outlined in red, as you can see. The speed management and road safety review that was completed in 2019 had the following findings. Speed was found to be excessive at the village limits. Speed was found to be acceptable within the village. Speed north of Embro near Ralph Street was found to be marginally excessive, and there were no apparent speed-related collision trends that we could see. 50-kilometer-hour zones at the approaches of the village extended beyond the built-up limits of the village itself, and the 80-kilometer-hour zone north of Embro near Ralph Street was considered appropriate and aligned with the driving environment. In November of 2019, after receiving council approval, the following traffic calming measures were made. The 50-kilometer-hour speed zone was adjusted at the approaches to match the limits of the built-up area. The speed feedback sign was relocated at the south end to match the newly adjusted 50-kilometer-hour speed zone limit. In 2022, Centerline Flexible Delineator Pilot Project was undertaken. Many of you probably remember. And installation of a pedestrian crossing was constructed at Union Street and St. Andrew Street. Community Safety Zone designation has been approved for Embro, and it's scheduled to be implemented in Q1 of this year. Here's some of the speed data that was collected over the years. We won't dive into this too much, but I'll summarize it on the next slide here. So the post-monitoring review findings from speed data collected in 2020, 2022, and 2024 include the following. At the north end, incoming speeds were reduced by up to 33 kilometers an hour, as shown in the 2020 data. Outgoing speeds at the north end were reduced by 9 kilometers per hour with the centerline delineators, however, otherwise remain excessive when the delineators weren't in place. At the south end, the incoming speeds were reduced by up to 28 kilometers per hour in 2020, and the outgoing speeds were reduced by 12 kilometers per hour with the centerline delineators in place, however, otherwise without them remains excessive. The recommendations for Embro include automated speed enforcement and community safety zone. So the county is currently considering the future implementation of automated speed enforcement, and that's being explored further. Physical features, so horizontal deflection at the approaches to Embro. And of course, that's following the outcome of a Plattsville pilot study that's happening this year. So many of you probably have been through Plattsville. At the east end, there was a center island, and it was intended to have a traffic calming approach. However, what was found was traffic was able to move over without any reduction in speed and just navigate their way around it. The Plattsville pilot study includes curb bump outs with that center island. So there will be a channelization coming into and out of that area through physical features, curbing, asphalt, signage, and that's intended to more or less force traffic to slow down in order to be able to navigate the area. And lastly, continued post-monitoring and data sharing with police. If maybe we could hold questions till the end, we can cover all three here. In Kintore, for Oxford Road 16 and Oxford Road 119, the Kintore study area you can see is outlined in red there on the slide. In 2019, speed management and road safety review was completed in Kintore. The findings included excessive speeds on the east end of County Road 16, marginally excessive speeds for incoming at the north end on 119. Incoming and outgoing percentile speeds were excessive at the west end, County Road 16, and 60-kilometer-hour zones at the north, south, and east ends were found to extend beyond the urban cross-section limits of Kintore. The traffic calming measures that were implemented in June 2021 upon council approval included introduction of a 40-kilometer-hour school zone for A.J. Baker Public School on County Road 119 at prescribed times. So, speed feedback sign was installed at the west end of the village, at the village limit, where the 60-kilometer-hour zone begins. The 60-kilometer-hour zone at the north end of the village was adjusted to better align with the village limits. And accessible curb drops, tactile sidewalk plates, and ladder crosswalk markings were installed in 2022 as part of some road resurfacing work that happened there at that time. Had some wheel rutting on 119. Here's the data that was collected for Kintore. Again, we won't get into it in detail, but I'll summarize. Next slide. So the post-monitoring key findings included at the west end of the village, incoming speeds were reduced by 14 kilometers per hour. That was the end where the speed feedback sign was installed. Outgoing speeds had no change at the west end. At the north end, incoming speeds were reduced by 7 kilometers per hour, and outgoing speeds increased by as much as 6 kilometers per hour. And at the south end, speeds increased by 3 kilometers per hour for incoming, and outgoing speeds increased by as much as 14 kilometers per hour at the south end. So with that data, the following recommendations are being proposed. Installation of flexible centerline delineators on all village approaches. Speed feedback signs at the north, south, and east approaches. Again, the west side already has one. And automated speed enforcement within the community safety zone, if automated speed enforcement comes to be. And lastly, continued post-monitoring and data sharing with police. Next community, Uniondale, includes County Road 119 and County Road 28. The west side of Uniondale is actually Township Road, as you all know. So the study area is summarized in red there on the map. In 2020, a speed management road safety review was completed. Study findings included left turns for southbound and northbound directions on 119 at 28 intersection were found to be not warranted. Incoming, outgoing 85th percentile speeds were excessive on 119 approaches, so coming into Uniondale. 60-kilometer-hour speed zone on OR 119 does not align with the built-up area, so it was out further into the rural parts approaching. And the incoming and outgoing 85th percentile speeds on County Road 28 approach was acceptable at that time. County Road 28 at the time was an 80-kilometer-hour road. The traffic calming measures that were introduced in June of 2022 included adjusted 60-kilometer-hour speed zone limits on the north and south approaches to align with the village. 60-kilometer-hour speed zone was implemented on County Road 28 at the essentially at the village limits. Speed feedback signs were installed at the north and south approaches, and transverse pavement markings were added as well at the north and south approaches in advance of the speed zone change. Here's the data that was collected for Uniondale. I'll summarize on the next slide here. The post-monitoring data that was collected in 2022, 2023, and 2024. Key findings included on the north side of the village, incoming speeds were reduced by up to 3 kilometers per hour in 2024. Outgoing speeds were reduced by up to 10 kilometers per hour in 2022's data, and outgoing speeds increased by up to 3 kilometers an hour in 2023 and 5 kilometers per hour in 2024. At the south end of the village, incoming speeds were reduced by up to 23 kilometers per hour with the 2024 data, and outgoing speeds reduced by up to 6 kilometers per hour, 2022. At the east end, incoming speeds increased by up to 8 kilometers per hour. Outgoing speeds increased by up to 2 kilometers per hour. So with that, the recommendations being proposed for Uniondale include the installation of centerline flexible delineators at the north, south, and east approaches, speed feedback sign installations at the east approach, continued post-monitoring and data sharing with police. So next steps in this process include public communications. County will issue bailout to residents affected in each of the 3 communities, as well as media communications put up on our Speak Up Oxford page. From there, we will follow up with a report to County Council in March, on the 12th of March, with these recommendations. And from there, the implementation of additional measures is planned for Q3 of this year. And then once those measures are added, we'll continue again with post-monitoring. So this whole cycle comes full circle, as you can see. And with that, I thank you for your time, and I'd like to open it up to any questions or comments you may have.
Thank you. Questions from council? Councilor Stewart.
Yeah, so Embro was the only one in the recommendations that talks about the physical features potentially being added, right? And that was still subject to further analysis of Plattsville study? Is that, okay. Yeah. So what, like, in the timing and the implementation, is there upcoming feedback on Plattsville that imminently you'll have a decision on whether that would be a recommendation or not?
Thank you, through the mayor. So yeah, by the end of this year, we'll have data on the results of that study, and then we'll share that with County Council, and then consider an implementation plan again with I assume part of budget approval as well.
Okay. And the second question I had, obviously there's mention of police here a few times. Do we know whether there was any feedback from OPP on whether they were ever placing themselves in these communities to check on speeding as well? And do we have any feedback from them?
Yeah, so all the data collected from the county is shared with OPP. They have their own traffic analysts, so we provide them with the raw data. They sift through it. They see, essentially, they're looking for key times and days where they can do targeted enforcement, right? Focused patrol. They don't want to, obviously they have limited resources as well, so they try and target their efforts to make the most of the data that we provide them. So hopefully that answered the question. Yeah.
Any other questions? Councilor Mitchell.
So it would appear that the speed feedback signs are relatively successful in reducing speeds, inbound speeds into the three communities. Are the numbers that you're seeing in these three communities in line with what you've seen in other communities where you've put in signs as far as reduction of speeds coming in?
Through the mayor, yes, that's correct. The speed feedback signs are proven to be effective at reducing the incoming speeds. Through the Embro delineator pilot study, we were also able to verify that the delineators have a positive effect on the outgoing speeds. We saw reductions in outgoing speeds in Embro. We've also installed delineators in the community of Verschoyle in southwest Oxford and found the same study results there. So delineators are effective in reducing the outgoing speeds, may have some impact on the incoming speeds, but more so with the outgoing, and the speed feedback signs are proven to be effective for the incoming.
So you're recommending some delineators in Uniondale and I believe Kintore. What's the lifespan of those those delineators? Apparently they didn't last long in Embro for various reasons. And what's the cost of installing them versus the impact?
So when we did the Embro pilot study, we sourced delineators from a company. You're correct. We didn't have very much luck with them standing up to traffic. They were getting damaged quite frequently, and we ended up having to replace them quite regularly. Since that time, we've moved to another vendor, another product that is proven to be more robust than what we were previously using. If I can give an example, in Verschoyle, we did encounter a period of time there where we were having to install new ones as a result of intentional vandalism or destruction. Thankfully, police were able to work with us and get that slowed down. Once the intentional vandalism had slowed down, the new units that we were using stood up very well and actually last the remainder of the season. So at the end of the season, the markings on them had been deteriorated and marked up quite substantially, but thankfully we could just replace the center piece of it, and the anchor itself is still good. So as far as the installation goes, the units themselves run roughly $300 a piece. If staff were to install in Kintore, let's say a couple of staff could have them installed in the morning, right? So approximately 3 or 4 hours we would have all 4 locations installed. And then once they're installed, provided they stand up and don't require any future maintenance for the season, prior to the onset of winter, we would remove them, cap those holes so that those same locations can be installed again the following spring.
Greg.
So the delineators, the data is showing that they work. The community experience, I think the narrative was a little bit different. So always a pleasure to have these follow-up presentations. While it's a county decision, it's great to have that information come to us here. You spoke about the targeted damage that does happen to these, and over time communities generally decrease that targeted damage. Do we have a sense, so it was just 2022 that they were installed in Embro, so the data collection around the efficacy of it was in that one 2022 year, correct?
Through the mayor, for Embro, that's correct. So we had collected speed data prior to implementation, implemented them, collected it while they were up, and then analyzed from there. We also have data from the Verschoyle location as well. But yes.
So with the damage that did occur in the community, do we have a sense of how much of it was targeted vandalism versus farm equipment damage? And do we have a sense of, in our rural communities where farm equipment is using these same roadways that we're trying to also make safer for our communities, will all of these locations where the delineators are being proposed allow for farm equipment to still go through those roadways, or are there other considerations for how we're addressing the potential conflict between farm equipment and delineators?
So again, through the mayor, the targeted damage that was incurred was very clear that it was basically spray paint, or the units were pulled right out of the pavement entirely, right? So farm vehicles can drive over these things without damaging them. We've seen that in Verschoyle. Verschoyle's Culloden Road has a substantial amount of farm equipment that goes through there, and you could see where the units themselves had been driven over, but had not been damaged to the point where they needed replacement. So we recognize Oxford County is a farming community, and obviously whatever solutions we implement need to be acceptable to the farming community as well, to be able to still use our roadways. So I hope that's answered the question.
Yeah, and then maybe just if I could follow up with one comment. I think the position we're in now with this report, when they were first put in as a pilot project, I think all we had was sort of the idea of it. And as a community response to the idea of it, there was a lot of space for it to be negative. So it's great hearing this data that now we have, that we know this thing can work. So maybe there's space as a community to have a different idea about how we feel about them and treat them.
Anyone else? Councillor Finch.
The community safety zone. So with talking about the speed enforcement, that's in the full 50 to 50, or is that just in a shortened block there, if it were to be enforced in the village of Embro? Like, does that happen right? If and when you do the community safety zone in that area?
Through the mayor, I'm sorry, we should have included that on the slide. I believe it's the full limits of the community through the entire reduced speed zone through Embro, but yeah, we can follow up on that.
And, sorry, the bump outs that you've done in Plattsville, I assume that farm equipment is able to get around and work with that as well, if you'll be putting it at both ends of Embro?
Again, through the mayor, yes, that's correct. So although cars will be forced to slow down and navigate their way around it, as will commercial vehicles, but farm tractors and equipment will be able to ride up over. The outer curb areas of the channelization will be mountable curb, so it will allow for farm vehicles to navigate through that.
Anyone else? Councillor Mitchell.
I have nothing on this delegation, but I do have a comment on the report to do with the four-way stop, Embro Road and Road 96, that's related to. Would it be appropriate to? Very brief.
How about we finish off with this topic,
Yep.
and then I'll let you ask them the question then.
Yep.
Because
Just to.
I wonder if we should actually just correspond.
It's just that it's their department, and
I'm just wondering.
would it be there'd be the people to talk to while they're here.
Yep, so maybe why don't we finish up with this delegation, and then maybe we pull ahead 12.
Okay, however you want to manage it.
No, that's fine.
Yep.
That makes sense. You guys have a moment now to think about how you're going to take that. So I have a couple questions and mostly comments here, I think. So to clarify, first of all, in each of the three cases here, it talks about post-monitoring. So for residents, that basically means that the same post-monitoring that's resulting in the revised recommendations today would happen again after these changes? There would be more post-monitoring and consideration of, you know, if there are other changes needed?
Through the mayor to answer that, yes, that is correct. We would continue to do post-monitoring after these implementation measures are put in place to see, you know, how effective they are, whether we've curbed the problem or whether we need to revisit and consider other alternatives.
So residents could expect this basically to be an ongoing process. We monitor, recommend changes, post-monitor, potentially more changes and more monitoring. This would be an ongoing process.
That's correct.
Thank you. A couple other questions that I have. Contour, does the, I didn't see the data in here, and I apologize for not asking sooner, but it just occurred to me now. Do we have the data that tells us whether the reduced speed at specific times of the day is how effective is that?
Through you, I think you're referring to the reduced speed zone for the school?
Yeah. Sorry, yes, for the community safety zone on the northbound leg.
So when we collect speed data, it's collected 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The prescribed times for the school zone are very brief. And no, we didn't tease any data out to say what that looked like during those prescribed times when the flashing lights were working. No, we didn't analyze that.
And then in Uniondale, it shows that, if I understand correctly, that the northbound speed feedback sign reduced the speeds by, I think it was on average 24, I think it was kilometers an hour. But the southbound one only by like 4. And I'm just wondering if there's any understanding as to why that difference would be there. Because I mean, 24 to me is pretty significant, but the 4, I think, on the southbound incoming is pretty insignificant.
Thank you. I don't know that we can say definitively why that's happening. It may be just because of the, again, the driving environment, whether there's I don't know is it an uphill coming into Uniondale? Or going north and downhill coming south, so maybe that's part of it. And it is a short section, and we wonder too if, you know, traffic can sort of see the end as they're coming through, so it just promotes them to maintain their speed. So.
Anyone else? Deputy Mayor.
Just a related follow-up, like it's the increased speeds, like these were the initiatives taken, and then this is the result. So is there any additional ideas of what might be causing some of these increases, specifically in Uniondale? I understand that the delineators and the speed feedback signs are the tools that we're seeing are having the most impact, so putting those in the additional spaces, I can understand why that would be the response to it. I'm just trying to understand how we're increasing our speeds even when we are taking measures to try to reduce them.
Thank you through the mayor. Yeah, again, it's hard to I guess predict what's causing that. It could be complacency with the signs too. If the drivers are becoming used to it, could become the specific driving environment. But yeah, it's sometimes a challenge to understand what's promoting those speeds.
Councillor.
Questions are coming up because people are asking other questions, but is there any data or any just context you could provide as to whether there's a significant increase in volume as well? Like that's not part of this. This is just before and afters in terms of data of speeds. I'm sure there's been, well, I would assume there's been some increases, but just curious if we have any data on that, generally speaking, mainly in the east-west traffic, but overall on the rural roads throughout the county and township.
Thank you through the warden. Yes, we do collect biannual volume data, and as part of the speed data too, it does include volume and vehicle class.
And so has there been an increase over the last 5 years since we started tracking some of these and implementing some of these solutions?
To be honest, not sure specifically with Uniondale, but generally countywide, I think we're seeing just normal growth increases that you would expect. But. True enough.
Anyone else? So I thought of another one as well. Should we, on 96 eastbound into the village of Uniondale, now that will be the only leg that won't have delineators. Would there, and I don't, you know, obviously that's a specific question for the appropriate authority for the road, but it's also sort of more philosophical. Is there value in sort of a consistent, you know, coming into the village, delineators everywhere? Frankly, where it's coming from is, I thought residents are going to say, how come those three and not that one? And I guess the question is, do we have a good answer other than, well, that's an Oxford Road and that's a Zorra Road? Because in and of itself, that's not a good enough answer, really, right?
So these studies are generated by complaints. Like to date, we haven't had any complaints generating or for our traffic calming policy to enact it to start the process. There'd be no problem at all for our staff to get some data on that section to see if there's any warrant for it. To do it just to make it consistent with the other four corners. I'm not sure if that warrants the cost. I'd rather see it done for like a data-based decision on that.
Any other questions for the delegation on this topic? All right, you guys good with sitting tight for one more minute and some questions on the other? Okay, so I'm going to suggest that if we're going to give them the questions and do this now, that we should also have a motion to deal with information item 12E as well when we're done. So information item 12E is Oxford County PW 2025-04, Oxford Road 28 and Oxford Road 6 intersection review. Any discussion or questions on that report? Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, while you're here, I just wanted to run this by you because it's your report, and it's about the decision to not install four-way stops at the intersection of what we call Road 96, you call Oxford Road 28, and the Embro Road. And I fully agree with that decision. In my years as a firefighter, I attended a lot of MVCs at that corner and a few fatals, and almost exclusively those were caused by people blowing through the stop signs going east and west. And I think the measures that have already been taken with the oversized stop signs, the flashing light, the lighting at the corner, and especially the very aggressive rumble strips that have been installed, I think go a lot further to dealing with the problems there. I know other municipalities do put in four-way stops out on rural roads, and there are certain areas such as Contour is a great example where four-way stop makes a lot of sense because of the obstructed views coming up to that corner. But my experience is that four-way stops out in the country are actually more dangerous than not because you get people thinking they can see that nobody's coming and they'll just blow right through. So I just wondered if you, first of all, I want to applaud the decision, and I wondered if there's any comments in addition to what was in the report about four-way stops and where they should be put and where they shouldn't be put.
Thank you, through the mayor. Yeah, so obviously we use Ontario Traffic Manual warrant criteria as an initial start, I guess. So look at the volumes and the collision history there, and make a decision based on that. So I think you made a good point there. It is important to use best practices and use those warrants appropriately. And as you said, where installing a four-way stop where it's not warranted can actually make things worse than better. Although it is Ontario Traffic Manual is a guideline, so engineering judgment comes into play too. So you have to consider other factors, and you mentioned sight lines too. So that might be another factor that comes into play. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but last year all-way stop was implemented on Road 28, Road 96 east of 59 at the 16th line. and it didn't meet the warrants there, but we did see a significant increase in collisions over a 12-month period. So I think like 8 or 10 collisions during that time. So that was concerning, as well as sightline issues there too. So although it didn't meet the warrant, we made the decision to implement the all-way stop. And I think in Ingersoll's another example. At Canterbury too, there was a need for a pedestrian crossing there. So because of the configuration, a PXO wasn't considered safe, so an all-way stop was implemented to support pedestrian crossing.
Anyone else on 12E? Thanks, guys. So Karen has just suggested that since we're already in information items, rather than deal with just E, why don't we just deal with all information items now and deal with 12 A, B, C, D, as well as E? If nobody objects, we'll go ahead and do that. So any questions or comments on 12A through E, and or does anybody want to pull any out and do anything separate with any of them? Looks like Councillor Stewart's ready.
Moved by Stewart, seconded by Gregg, that items 12A through E be received and filed for information purposes only.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. And then back to, I think we're at 8. Yes. Reports from Public Services Department, 8.1 Roads Division, Report 2025-014 from the Director of Public Services regarding roads monthly report. Director Oliver, is there anything you'd like to highlight for Council?
Nothing to highlight. I think I almost jinxed the weather statement in my report, and we did get a little bit of rain, but nothing too damaging. Made the roads a little slippery, but other than that, no, nothing to update.
Questions from Council? Councillor Mitchell.
Steve, thanks for the note in there about the innovation on the sidewalk sandhopper that you're using. And I just, I sense some barnyard technology was involved in developing this. I just wondered, does the township have a way of recognizing staff people that come up with ideas like this, and not necessarily a monetary reward, but some type of recognition? Because I know when I did the tour of the ZMF, I was talking to some of the guys, and they said, well, we did this to that, and it worked, but that didn't work. And I think this kind of an ongoing thing that, and not only public works staff, but all staff, I think they all come up with some good ideas that we don't know about. So is there a way of somehow publicizing these good ideas?
Thank you for the question, and it's a good point. And that's one of the reasons why I add these things into my reports, just so there is some public knowledge and there's council knowledge of these things, that the staff do work hard at these changes, and it's not just on innovations like this. It's just on efficiencies on our routes. Now, working from the ZMF location, the routes had to change, and after even doing the routes a few times, they found even more efficiency. So they sat down as a group and worked together, and those type of things is awesome to see. And and not just public works staff, but all staff. We celebrate a recognition evening where all staff is recognized by council and public. So that's taken into consideration. But as far as any monetary or anything like that, there isn't. But it's encouraged and it's praised within the workplace too, as well, right? So.
Well, I think it's great for staff morale. It's good for staff retention when people are encouraged to bring in their ideas, and some of them are going to work and some of them aren't. And whether we recognize them through these type of reports or through our social media or in Zorra now, I would encourage that it doesn't have to be formal or fancy, but I think it's the type of work environment that we want to encourage. And obviously we are, because we have a really good solution for a very basic problem that is benefiting not only our employees, but the township. I'm sure this particular operation is now more efficient than it was before you developed this sandhopper.
Yeah, 100%. Like, the efficiencies are amazing, and environmentally too, because the old practice of dumping the sand salt mixture on the ground, covering it with a tarp isn't a good solution, right? So it fixes it checks all the boxes. So it was great, and it was done very inexpensively. All the equipment was sourced, used, so it was as you said, it was a barnyard creation.
Any other questions for staff on the report? Have a mover? Deputy Mayor?
I think I'm done choking on air. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Stewart, that report 2025-019 be received and filed for information purposes only.
Is it 019?
I think that was mine. I'm glad I'm not the only one that's a little off kilter this morning. Moved by Councillor Mitchell, seconded by Councillor Finch, the report 2025-014 from the Director of Public Services be received and filed for information purposes only.
Is there any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And 8.2, Recreation and Facilities Division, Report 2025-004 from the Manager of Recreation and Facilities regarding monthly departmental activities. Manager Caldwell, is there anything you'd like to highlight for Council?
Good morning. Yes, I would like to highlight something in my report. We mentioned that our team is exploring online registration options through our Amelia system. And since the time of writing this report, we have connected and visited with other nearby municipalities using similar processes to what we have been researching. And we have determined that the best next step would be to focus on a transition to a new wireless POS system where our participants can pay with debit and credit card. As a first step in reducing cash in our facilities. And so as an update, we did pilot that new POS system at our Shinny and Public Skate program this past Sunday. It was really slick. It was really well received by participants, saved a number of families from taking cash out at the ATM and fumbling with change. And so our next step in this transition will be to expand this POS option to our more of our drop-in programming and just assess the results and see if online registration is appropriate at that time for some programs that might not be as staffed, but our primary focus right now is to just transition with this new POS system.
Any questions for staff on the report? Councillor Mitchell.
So to follow up what you're just talking about, is the ultimate goal to reduce cash payment or to eliminate cash payment, or are you just working your way through to find out where the happy medium is?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. This, the latter there. Our immediate goal is to simply reduce cash payments in our facilities, to minimize some risks that go hand in hand with that, find some efficiencies in our department, and then improve that convenience and access to our participants. So our primary goal right now is simply to remove or reduce the cash payments, and then as we successfully introduce this POS system and expand it across our programming, we'll assess if a fully cashless future is really a feasible option for our community.
Any other questions on the report? Do I have a mover? Councillor Mitchell.
Moved by Councillor Mitchell, second by Councillor Finch, that report 2025-004 be received and filed for information purposes only.
Is there any discussion? Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, and I can't remember if Rec had these report or project tracking sheets in last year as well. I know obviously Public Works did. But just to comment that, I mean, we trust the staff are executing everything in the budget and as throughout the year, but I think these are just great to have in the reports. I enjoy just kind of looking at where they're at, and obviously it's early on in the year to be seeing that, but it's just great to see these I mean, they're a great tracking tool, and I'm sure internally, but why not share them and have some more transparency? So they're great to see.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And still in Recreation and Facilities, Report 2024-160 from the Manager of Recreation and Facilities and the Legislative Coordinator Deputy Clerk regarding Zorra Multi-Use Courts Committee Update. Manager Caldwell, what would you like to highlight for Council before I ask them for questions?
Nothing specifically to highlight, just to say that this report does contain a lot of background information, simply to bring council and the public up to speed on, or up to date on where we're at with the multi-use courts project and kind of the evolution of decision-making around the location. So today I'm asking council to endorse the new proposed location of the courts so that we can move forward with our RFP process.
Questions from Council on the report? Do you have a mover?
Moved by Councillor Mitchell, seconded by Councillor Finch, that Council endorse the proposed new location of the multi-use courts on Block 26 of the Kingwood subdivision.
Is there any discussion? I'm very happy to see this happen. I attended the last couple of committee meetings, and I mean, they really chewed over this a lot. Like, I mean, they really ground out the details and bombarded staff with questions, and they weighed all the pros and the cons, and I think they've made a very responsible choice about how to move forward here. I think it's the right choice to move forward. They, as I say, they considered a lot of things, and I think this is a good decision, and I'm happy to support the committee in what they're doing here, because I think it is going to deliver, you know, maybe not quite as quickly as they would have hoped or wished when they started, but I think, you know, when it's all done and it's in that spot and it's happening, I think people are going to be so impressed by what this committee has achieved. Not just financially, although that was a huge achievement as well, but this location and what they've envisioned and what's going to go out in this RFP, what it's going to deliver is going to be pretty impressive, I think, when it's done. So I'm very happy to support this. Any other discussion before I call the question? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And 9, reports from Corporate and Protective Services Department, Emergency Services. Report 2025-019 from the Fire Chief and Manager of Emergency Services regarding the successful award of the Community Emergency Preparedness grants towards the purchase of a reception trailer. Chief Doyle, is there anything you want to highlight for Council?
Not at this time, although I'm open to questions.
Questions for the Chief from Council? Councillor Mitchell.
The trailer that you talk about in your report, what type of supplies would be on that trailer?
So the supplies will include bedding, cots, basically anything that you would require if you were displaced from your house quickly. We hope to have small amounts of foodstuffs. I will be looking to get donations of clothing, things like that to put in, toiletries and personal care items, just to make sure that people can be moderately comfortable should they be displaced and be in Zorra.
So the operating costs are going to be minimal, other than the food. Nothing's going to need to run out of, like bunker gear need to be replaced.
That is correct.
Yeah.
The maintenance will occur annually, and the food is going to be long-term freeze-dried. We're not providing steak dinners, but you know, we'll make sure that the cost benefit ratio is very much on the side of the municipality, because this is a hopefully never going to need device. But if you need one and you don't have one, it's a rough day.
So just comment, I applaud the initiative to go ahead with this project. I wasn't aware that the local Red Cross was closing down and that service was no longer available as we'd had it in the past, but I also want to applaud the initiative of applying for the funding to cover all this, so we're adding to our ability to serve our community and neighboring communities at no extra cost to the taxpayers.
Thank you.
Anyone else? So I have a question about that, no extra cost to taxpayers. So very supportive of this. I think it's a great thing. There's no immediate cost to taxpayers, but eventually this trailer's going to wear out, right? And we're going to have to replace it. I don't think it's a huge, budget breaking item. But I mean, this is one of those scenarios where so we're getting it for free, but in whatever number of years, 10 years or something like that, we have essentially enhanced the level of service that we deliver. Does the cost of replacement of this rise to the level of fitting into an asset management plan? Like, how do we manage the future necessary replacement of this thing to maintain the service level that we're now committing to?
Thank you for the question. This will be placed into our asset management and tracked for depreciation. Where it is an item that isn't going to be used often, I'm hoping that it's going to last much longer than a general trailer might. However, you are correct in giving this money to the township. The province is transferring that responsibility and the administration that comes with it. So we will have to budget for this in future budgets, although I expect that it to be a moderately low amount annually that would be required for that.
Thank you. Anyone else? And I can't remember whether I asked for a motion or not. We're still on questions, right? Do I have you have another question?
No, I just have a motion.
Oh, sorry. We'll figure this out eventually. Like, Deputy Mayor Craig.
I've read it once. I'm excited to read it twice. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Stewart, that report 2025-019 be received and filed for information purposes only.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And 9.2, Building and Drainage and Bylaw Services, report 2025-012 from the Chief Building Official Drainage Superintendent regarding monthly departmental activities. CBO Hughes, is there anything you'd like to highlight for council?
I would just highlight a little drainage activity on page 2. An existing municipal drain getting rebuilt, the J.B. Murray drain. Took a little time, but it's now going to start shortly.
Questions from council? Have a mover? Deputy Mayor.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Stewart, that report 2025-012 from the Chief Building Official / Drainage Superintendent be received and filed for information purposes only.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Nothing under financial services. 9.4 Legislative Services Report 2025-008 from the Chief Administrative Officer and Strategic Initiatives Coordinator regarding strategic plan update for public on township social media. I guess I'll start with CAO Larder. Is there anything you want to highlight? And I'll leave it to you how you want to divide that up between you.
So this report comes back to council as a summary of the activities that the township staff have been working on through the strategic plan. We have staff are taking the document that we have been presented to us and are working through those action plans currently. But in the future, we will be seeing this changed and put more emphasis on the pillars within the document, and staff will be bringing forward the initiatives under those pillars for council then to either endorse or make comments on. And that'll be a forward document in the future that we're working on. But currently, right now, we're just taking the current document we have right now in front of us and just completing the projects that are in that document at that time. And I'm more than happy to have Jacob speak a little bit more on the projects or on the whole on the report.
Thank you. Through the mayor. So the report here was basically to get council and the public up to speed on where the strategic initiatives are at. There hasn't been an update in a little while, and the initiatives were left kind of up in the air on where staff was at working on them. So we provided a chart for your review with the completed as well as the in progress strategic initiatives. We have been coordinating with department heads and the responsible staff on the projects individually to get you this update, and we will be providing further updates on a quarterly basis moving forward. We've also generated these social media documents, which I've included samples of here, to put on the council or the township website and on our social media, so that the public can get up-to-date updates on the individual initiatives as they are completed.
Questions from council? Councillor Mitchell.
Okay, the highlights of accomplishments, I appreciated that. And at Upper Thames Board, we have a similar chart that staff provides the directors with ongoing work on policies and other things. We receive that monthly, which I don't think we need to do that often here. So are we looking at perhaps having this come forward to us on a quarterly basis or a semi-annual basis, or what's the thoughts on that?
Yes, the intent is for us to provide a report to council on a quarterly basis.
Okay, that would be much appreciated to see what's going on.
Any other questions? Councillor Stewart.
You mentioned sort of staff working on their ideas for a sort of a bit of a new structure for the strategic plan moving forward. If there were, it seems like there's great progress being made on everything we set out to do this term. If, as part of your ongoing, review and what you'd like to see changed or what staff would like to see changed, what would be the best way to implement additional things if that was something that the council was interested in doing?
So what staff are looking for is that staff would be bringing forward those reports to council, and they would be selecting the pillar under that initiative would go under. But if council's looking for additional information, it would be either through a motion for staff to work on any kind of project that they're looking at also feel free to have a chat with the staff members on what you're looking at, and then staff would request that you would go forward with a motion. Okay.
Any other questions on the report? Councillor Mitchell.
A comment?
You okay if I wait until we get a motion on the
Yep.
Any other questions? I have a mover.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Stewart. Resolved that the Council of the Township of Zorra receive report 2025-008, 2023 to 2026 strategic plan update and awareness measures as information, and further that council approve the circulation of the correspondence attached to the report utilizing the township website and social media accounts.
As the mover, do you wish to speak to that?
Yes, please. I'm excited to see how well we are doing. I would say our staff are doing on achieving these initiatives that we set out in the exercise that we undertook at the beginning of this term. I'm excited to hear that there's some consideration as new staff in new roles are going through implementation of these items, how we may use strategic plan as a tool for Zorra, both through the remainder of this plan and into the future. The communication piece, the correspondence attached to this report, is for me the highlight of this report. I know it's sort of into the details, but for me it's the highlight. We do a lot of really great work on behalf of Zorra residents, and we have been improving the way that we share some of that positive work back to the community, and this is a prime example of it. I know when I first was elected on council the previous term, I had no idea what a strategic plan was or how to use it as a tool for me to bring the vision that I had for my community into the work that we do here. And with every additional year here, I have different ideas about how that could work. And And I think that's probably fairly common for residents as well. When we call to the public for them to help us build that strategic plan, for us to solicit that feedback from them, they may not really know how to engage with that process. So as we continue to look for how we can improve the process to leverage the best of council and community, having this ongoing conversation of communicating back to residents and to council about what we've been achieving, hopefully will also kind of fan that engagement where when they see, you know, we asked you what would you like to be done, these were the things that we all agreed upon, and now look at we're actually getting them done. The next time we put that call out to the public, we may see some additional voices come forward that have ideas on how to engage, and that there's a lot of meaning in making those submissions and seeing those things happen in the community. So I know this is both a specific report around updates and communications, but I think it's had all of us thinking about strategic planning as a tool, what it has done for Zorra, and I'm excited for what it will do for Zorra as we continue to grow.
Councillor Stewart is the seconder. Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, I'm very supportive of both these initiatives as the quarterly report to council and having it on the agenda for those. I don't think there's a lot of taxpayers that study our strategic plan closely and follow, but I think the format here makes it a lot easier for those who are interested, and I think will expand the number of people that will have a better understanding of how these discussions and decisions tie into the bigger plan that we've set out. And I also really like the examples, what you talked about as far as using the social media to explain in very brief and colorful ways to people, this is an issue that we identified was important, our staff looked at it, and this is why the decision was made to change something or to leave it the way it was. And it didn't hurt that as far as my appreciation level was that the 4 goals that you highlighted were ones that I had asked to be put in the strategic plan. So thank you for that.
Any other discussion? Yeah, I love this. Did you want to speak to that, Jacob?
I was just going to make a quick comment, if that's all right. I just wanted to say that I appreciate all of your feedback on this assignment. Also, that I think that the more public engagement that we can do regarding the strategic plan, the more common it will be that people will think about it. And I know that getting public feedback is always an uphill battle for all these different reasons, but we're going to try to get creative, especially with the next strategic plan, to highlight how important it is that people tell us what they want and what they need, because at the end of the day, these strategic initiatives that we're updating everybody on are what we assume and what we are told are important to the township. So the more updates we put out and the more people see, oh yeah, things that we said we want done are getting done, the more feedback hopefully we get in the future and the more initiatives we can fire off. So yeah, thank you.
Anyone else? I'm a big fan of this. I'm a big fan of strategic planning. I think the report with the quarterly updates and communicating to the public, I think, frankly, one of the reasons that I've seen organizations internally struggle with effectively utilizing strategic plans is some of the same reasons that you've highlighted here, that we need to talk to the public about it. Is a lot of strategic plans are a lot of effort is put into developing them and approving them, and then not a lot of effort is put in a lot of organizations, either internally or externally, in actually using them and communicating about them. And when you don't use them and communicate about them, then you're not closing the feedback loop. And I think if we do what's being recommended in this report, I think it will be a more useful document in the future for council prioritizing resources for staff, but more importantly, as you said, for residents to say, I know how to give input to council on these long-term objectives. When they ask about the strategic plan, I got to tell them I want this in there. It'll be up to us how to figure out how to translate their wants and needs into a strategic plan. But I think this should put us on a path of getting that feedback loop going of this is what was in the plan, this is what we got done, what's in the next plan. So I think this is excellent. Very excited to see this happening. Anybody else before I call the question? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And 10, correspondence requiring direction. Correspondence from the Ministry of Education regarding Thames Valley District School Board approved projects. So I'll just say I asked for this to be put on here, and I should have said information items, not correspondence, but anyway, that's my fault. But I just wanted to put this on here because I wanted it to be formally on an agenda here. It's been a goal of this council for, well, you know, the importance of our rural schools for, I don't know, 12 years, I think, was the first time I saw members of the council before I was on it, riding around in the back of a truck at the Calathumpian Parade with Save A.J. Baker shirts on. And explicitly a goal of this council from our Rural Education Task Force, the first of its kind, sorry, not Rural Education Task Force, our Rural Schools Advisory Committee, which was the first of its kind in all of Ontario and now being copied in other municipalities. And I can't remember when they passed, when council passed that resolution. It was in 2019, I think. And more recently then, when the township purchased this land and began working on what the redevelopment plan would look like, a school was part of that. So I want to give a huge amount of credit to council and staff for all the work they've done in this, in particular to Deputy Mayor Grigg and Councillor Finch, who sat with me at the Association of Municipalities of Ontario conference last August, across from the days old, I think, Minister Dunlop at the time, who, you know, met us for the first time and I think met her briefing note on this project like at the same time, and effectively lobbied her to approve this project. Also to the current chair of the board, Beth Mai, Dave Cripps, and Leanne Hopkins, our Oxford trustees, who are significant improvements on previous Oxford County representation on the school board, and have really pulled their weight on getting this done. I think this is like a real milestone achievement for the entire township, but specifically for the village of Thamesford. I mean, those kids can't even play soccer at that school now because there's so much of the grass taken up with portables. That's not right. There's only going to be more need for it, and part of the whole plan for the development of this site was that it would be complete not only for this development, but as a redevelopment for the whole village. And this is an essential part of that, combined with our recreation component that we're planning to do, and with another 88 space licensed childcare. The Township of Zorra will go in the space of just under 3 years from 0 licensed childcare spaces to 176 licensed childcare spaces. Just for context, Oxford County is the lowest served region in southwestern Ontario with respect to licensed childcare services, and this is how that's going to change. So I just wanted this on here so I could say that, because this is a titanic achievement, I think, for this overall community, and is going to, as it gets built out, going to be really transformative in the larger context of this development, but specifically the school. And I heard from staff today that the school board does in fact have a very aggressive timeline for when they're going to start to do this work. So I think we will see things happen very soon for our community on this. Anybody else on this item? Councillor Mitchell.
So I just want to confirm we're not making any decisions on this. Is just information today, and at some point there will be more information about the co-build, how much it's going to cost, and exactly where we're going to get if we decide to go ahead with that. Okay.
I mean, notwithstanding the motion that the Deputy Mayor is about to read, I don't know what she's going to read. It's up to you guys. Notwithstanding the motion that the Deputy Mayor is going to read, I don't know what she's going to read. Deputy Mayor.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Stewart, that item 10A be received and filed for information purposes only.
Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I just want to add on very briefly to your speaking words there. I think alongside everything you've said about this entire build up to this announcement here and putting this on our agenda so that we have a chance to formally see it and also share it with the community, I think the real standout in the value of this funding announcement is the way that this came to be, with a focus on community by the ministry, the school board, Board of Trustees representatives, primarily the Oxford County trustees, the work that they put into this, and the chair, Zorra Township Council, previous and current sitting, our incredible staff who have both since retired and are at the leadership now, and the ongoing work with staff and the developer. So I think, you know, while we organize ourselves in government where we're all responsible for our appropriate jurisdictions, which is how we have to operate, the funding and planning for education in communities, well, operationally, there's a siloed component to how it's delivered. This is what is possible when we as leaders both keep focus on our jurisdiction lanes and take care of our own individual responsibilities, but are called to collaborate and view functions of communities. So the pressures of growth on Thamesford would have eventually led to a new school. Would it have been this intake? It may not have been had we not worked collaboratively with the school board for them to make this application to the province. So there's a long list of things that I think we need to be really excited about for the future of Zorra that comes out of this. But for me, the real highlight is that each and every one of those sectors put the idea of community first, and I'll say because they were challenged to. So credit to where that that call for that challenge to put community first.
Anyone else? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And boards and committees, 11A and B. Anybody want to pull anything out or ask anything on Zorra multi-use courts before I ask Councillor Mitchell for his Upper Thames update? Deputy Mayor.
Just really quick, at the last meeting of ZMCC, the committee was elated to make their final endorsement for the RFP to be issued, and we have canceled the ongoing meeting schedule as it is currently not needed. So the committee is sort of in waiting and will be called back for work as necessary, but I think they are both very proud of the work they've done, excited for this process for the RFP, and very much looking forward to not having that monthly meeting in the calendar, at least for some time.
Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, I'm really happy to see that it's finally reached the RFP stage, and I want to congratulate you, Katie, and all the rest of the committee, the small committee that's hung in there for close to 5 years now. Plus, I know some of our staff have been involved in this ongoing. It seemed at one point that you were going to have to sell about 1 million donuts to make them the money to do this, but in the end, some big-time donators came through and have made this possible. So I just want to recognize the work that you and the rest of the committee have done to get this to this stage, and I think it's a great project that, quite frankly, was on shaky ground for quite a while, whether it was actually going to happen.
Anyone else? 11A, Councillor Mitchell.
The meeting of the Upper Thames Board for January 28th, we received a letter from the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry informing us that the Upper Thames is one of 10 conservation authorities that are going to have an agricultural rep appointed to the board. Thus, the agricultural member will have the same powers as any municipal representative, except they won't be able to vote on budget decisions. And the ministry is accepting applications until February 3rd, so that's passed. The pay for this member will be $150 a day, which is in contrast to the current per diem for board members, which is $59 a day and has been in place for at least 20 years. So that led to a motion from Brian Petrie, which was seconded by myself, that the Upper Thames increase the per diem to be in line with the provisional rates for boards and board-governed agencies to $150 today for members, $175 for vice chair, and $225 for chair. And there's no extra pay for committees because the committee meetings are scheduled on the same day as board meetings. At $59 a day, when you figured the preparation time and meeting time, board members were working for about $7 to $8 an hour. So the board members have understood that it's never a good PR move to increase your pay, but considering that the pay had been static for 20 years, that motion was accepted. We had a lengthy report on updates to hearing committee guidelines and delegations of powers for senior staff. This was all to do with a lot of what we do with align with the legislative changes. Section 28 report on permits, and gave the summary for 2025. There was 191 permits issued, 25 permit extensions or amendments, and 321 clearances, which is where staff looks at an application on a property that's in a regulated area, and determine that the scope of the work does not require an actual permit to be issued. So that gives an idea of the tremendous amount of work that department and the handful of people that work in that have to cover on a yearly basis. There are currently 43 applications in the progress. 0 of those are in Zorra, 12 in London, and 9 in Middlesex Centre. So that's where the bulk of the development work is ongoing. We had a report on public funding applications to grants over the period of 2024 into early 2025. And the Upper Thames staff have been successful in getting 32 grants from 25 different agencies for a total of $21.6 million. Now, the bulk of that is $17.4 million, a federal grant that has to do with phosphorus reduction over the next 4 years. Phosphorus in the watershed, and which eventually ends up in the Great Lakes. But that leaves $4.2 million in grant money that would otherwise have to come from municipal levy, or those projects would not be done. So a tremendous amount of work by Upper Thames staff to apply for those grants. And then we had our annual elections. Past chair is Brian Petrie from Ingersoll, who had served 2 one-year terms, which is the limit for chair. The new chair is Dean Trenkowski from West Perth. The new vice chair is Mark Schattenberg from Woodstock. And the hearing committee consists of the past chair, the vice chair, and Sandy Levin from London and Jim Craigmile from St. Mary's. The finance and audit committee comprises the chair and vice chair, and also Sandy Levin, Harj Nijar from Stratford, and myself. And the next board meeting is the AGM on February 25th, and that will be when we pass the 2025 budget. And there's always special presentations to recognize community volunteers and long-serving staff.
Any discussion? Have a motion? Deputy Mayor.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Stewart, that items 11A and B be received and filed for information purposes only.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. We dealt with 12 information items. Well, there's only 5, but we dealt with item 12, information items. And there is no unfinished business, so notices of motion, and I'm going to ask the
Okay. Just get my ducks in a row. Does anyone have a notice of motion that they would like to put forward in the meeting? Mayor Ryan.
I do. Would you like me to read the my notice of motion now?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Moved by Ryan, seconded by Finch. Whereas Canada and the United States have the world's most comprehensive and dynamic trading relationship, which supports millions of jobs in each country, and whereas on February 1st, 2025, the U.S. announced that it is imposing tariffs of 25% on all Canadian goods and a tariff of 10% on energy exports from Canada imported into the U.S. from Canada, and whereas the Government of Canada has responded to the U.S. imposition of tariffs on Canadian goods by introducing a first set of countermeasures designed to apply economic pressure on the U.S. to remove the tariffs as soon as possible, and whereas the Government of Ontario has also been responsive to the imposition of U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods, including banning U.S. companies from provincial contracts and discontinuing existing contracts with U.S. companies, and whereas municipalities, while relatively small players in Canada-U.S. trade, collectively procure substantial quantities of goods and services from U.S. suppliers, now therefore be it resolved that Council direct staff to prepare a report outlining actions that can be taken to ensure relevant Township of Zorra procurement practices are aligned with recent directives advanced by the Province of Ontario and Government of Canada, and further that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to all Oxford County municipalities, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, Oxford County MPP candidates, Oxford County MP, Arpan Khanna, and the Office of the Prime Minister of Canada.
So as per our procedural bylaw, for consideration of notice of motion submitted during the meeting, we require a vote of council for consideration that will go to a two-thirds majority in order to pass. Do I have a motion to waive notice for notice of motion?
Moved by Stewart, seconded by Finch, that council waive the need for notice and allow for the motion as presented by Mayor Ryan.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, so now we'll go back to the motion that is now able to be discussed. So as the mover of the motion, would you like to speak to it?
So I know, first of all, I want to thank council for letting me put this on the floor. I don't like doing that, but I think this is time sensitive, even though I was going to say the United States, but it's President Trump has deferred this. I think the emphasis is on deferred. It's delayed. There's no guarantee that it's not coming back. The intention of my report here, of my motion here, is that we get a report from staff on what it would look like, and I think we need to know what it looks like regardless of whether it's over and it never comes back again. We should be prepared, but it might be back again. Whether it's 25% in 30 days or 20 or 5, I don't know, but I think we need to be prepared. I think that the next sort of 4 years are going to be a lot of stuff like this, and I think whenever we can do something to be prepared for what that might be in advance, I think we should. I don't know frankly, whether we can even do this. There are legal ramifications to doing this that I think we need to understand, whether we can do it at all, if we can do it, how. And also I think there's going to be budgetary implications. I think we're probably going to see budgetary implications regardless, because the threat of tariffs has introduced risk for businesses, and risk means cost one way or another, and businesses are going to attempt to do that. They're going to renegotiate contracts. New contracts are going to have inflated costs to try and accommodate that risk, and we're going to see that. So I think my intention here is to get a report from staff on, can we do this? How do we do it? What's it going to cost to do it? And be prepared as we can be for what might come. So that's my intention here.
Would anyone else like to speak to this? Councillor Mitchell?
Once again, a motion comes before this council that I had no awareness of until it was presented, and I'm always a little cautious about us stepping outside our boundaries, but I'm going to support the motion because the way I read it is that it's looking at a way to protect ourselves as far as our procurement policies in face of what could be significant added costs to operating the township if these tariffs are actually imposed.
Would you like the motion read again, or can I call the vote? I'll just call the vote. It is up on the screen if anyone's wanting to see it again. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
Sorry, and I think then we're at bylaws. No bylaws. 16, items of community interest. Councillor Finch.
February 17th, Family Fun Day, 11 to 4. The Tempsford Lions are putting on in the Tempsford Rec Hall. February 25th, Community Futures Oxford is hosting International Women's Day breakfast and panel discussion at the Elmhurst. February 28th, the Egg Society is holding a winter social comedy show at the Ember Arena.
Anyone else? Not seeing anything. Closed session, there is nothing. All I have is confirmatory and adjournment. Motion to confirm, confirmatory motion? Yep.
Moved by Stuart, seconded by Greg, that bylaw 04-25, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council held February 5th, 2025, be read a first, second, and third time this February 5th, 2025, and further that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign the same and affix the corporate seal thereto.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And a motion to adjourn. Yep. Councillor Stewart.
Moved by Stuart, seconded by Greg, that this session of council be now adjourned and herewith closed at 11:48 a.m. and the next meeting of council be called for February 19th, 2025 at 6 o'clock p.m. in the council chambers at the Zorra Municipal Center.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. We are adjourned.